My name is Nolan Crestwood. I'm 47 years old, and for 11 years I rebuilt Tiernan and Sons Construction from the ground up. When I started there, it was a failing outfit with 3 guys in a pickup truck. When I left, it was pulling in $4 million annually with a spotless reputation across Denver's commercial district. I learned construction the hard way. My father, Jack Crestwood, was a carpenter who taught me that every nail matters and every measurement counts. "Build it right the first time, son," he'd say, wiping sawdust from his weathered hands. "Your name goes on everything you touch." That philosophy carried me through 2 decades in the industry. From swinging hammers on residential frames to managing multi-million-dollar office complexes. Tiernan and Sons wasn't much when Cormac Tiernan hired me in 2012. The old Irish immigrant had built the company in the 80s, but by the time I arrived, his health was failing and his projects were disasters. Inspectors knew the company name, and not in a good way. Subcontractors demanded payment up front. Architects wouldn't return calls. I changed all that. Systematically, methodically, professionally. First, I implemented quality control protocols that turned our inspection pass rate from 60% to 98%. Then I rebuilt relationships with the city's planning department, showing up to meetings with detailed documentation and realistic timelines. Within 18 months, we were getting calls for projects we'd never qualified for before. The breakthrough came in 2014 when we landed the Morrison Medical Plaza contract. 3 floors, underground parking, tight deadline. Every other contractor in town had either botched similar projects or priced themselves out. I spent weeks walking the site, consulting with the structural engineers, coordinating with utilities. When we delivered 6 days early and $28,000 under budget, word spread fast. By 2019, we were the go-to firm for mid-size commercial work in the Denver metro area. I'd built a team of 18 full-time employees and maintained relationships with the best subcontractors in Colorado. My project managers trusted my judgment. My clients recommended us without hesitation. Cormac Tiernan went from struggling to pay his mortgage to buying a vacation home in Aspen. But success has a way of attracting the wrong kind of attention. If you enjoy stories of cold-blooded revenge and gripping plot twists, like this video, and subscribe to the channel now. There are brand new unreleased stories here every day, each one more intense than the last. Pierce Tiernan graduated from UC Denver with an MBA in 2020. 30 years old now in 2025. No construction experience, but plenty of opinions about how his father's business should run. During the pandemic, while I was keeping projects moving and workers employed, Pierce was living in his downtown loft, posting LinkedIn articles about disrupting traditional industries. When he showed up at the office in September 2021, I knew trouble was coming. "Dad's getting older," Pierce told me during our first meeting. "It's time to modernize operations and expand market share." He had a PowerPoint presentation about vertical integration and cost optimization. I listened politely while he explained how we could increase profits by 20% within 6 months. How? I asked. Streamlined processes, automated workflows, strategic vendor partnerships, corporate buzzwords that meant nothing on a construction site. I tried to explain the realities of our industry, how relationships with inspectors took years to build, how our reputation depended on quality, not speed, how the margins he was targeting would require cutting corners that could get people hurt. Pierce nodded and smiled, but I could see he wasn't listening. In his mind, construction was just another business to optimize with spreadsheets and synergy. The first disaster happened in November 2021. Pierce convinced his father to bid aggressively on the Lakewood Community Center project. I warned them the timeline was impossible and the budget inadequate. Pierce overruled me, promising the city we could deliver in 8 months for $2.1 million. I'd estimated 14 months and $2.6 million. We got the contract. Pierce celebrated with champagne in the office. 3 months later, we were behind schedule, over budget, and failing inspections. The electrical work had to be redone twice. The foundation poured incorrectly in January's freeze. The city threatened to pull our permits. I worked 18-hour days trying to salvage the project, calling in favors with subcontractors and eating costs that should have bankrupted us. We finished 4 months late and lost nearly $500,000. Pierce blamed unforeseen complications and vendor reliability issues. But that was just the beginning. By spring 2022, Pierce had convinced 3 longtime clients to terminate their contracts. The Highlands office complex, a project I'd spent 8 months developing with the architects, went to our biggest competitor because Pierce kept pushing changes that violated building codes. The client's patience finally snapped when Pierce suggested we could save money by using substandard rebar. "Mr. Crestwood," the project manager told me over the phone, "we've worked with you for 7 years. Your reputation is impeccable, but we can't risk our timeline on experimental approaches." He was being diplomatic. What he meant was, we can't trust Pierce not to cut corners that could collapse the building. I documented everything, every failed inspection, every cost overrun, every client complaint. Not because I was planning revenge, but because it was my job to protect the company's interests. At least I thought it was still my company, too. The breaking point came at the Christmas party in December 2022. Cormac rented out Bistro Vendôme in downtown Denver, the same restaurant where we'd celebrated landing our first $1 million contract back in 2015. 43 employees, spouses, and key subcontractors filled the private dining room. I'd organized similar events for 8 years running, but this time Pierce handled the arrangements. Everything felt different. The decorations were fancier but somehow cheaper. The menu was impressive on paper but poorly executed. Pierce had invited clients we barely knew while excluding foremen who'd been with us for decades. It felt like a performance rather than a celebration. After dinner, Cormac stood up to make his annual speech. Usually, he'd thank the crew, highlight successful projects, and toast another profitable year. This time, he cleared his throat nervously and pulled out written notes. 30 years ago, I started this company with nothing but determination and a borrowed truck, he began. But businesses aren't just about the founder. They're about legacy, about passing something meaningful to the next generation. I felt my stomach tighten. Around the room, conversations quieted as people sensed the gravity in his voice. Effective January 1st, Pierce will assume the role of President and Chief Operating Officer of Tiernan & Sons Construction. Scattered applause, mostly from Pierce's college friends who'd somehow made the guest list. The construction crews exchanged uncomfortable glances. Nolan will transition to a strategic advisory role, focusing on documentation and process improvement. Cormac looked at me apologetically. His experience will be invaluable as we enter our next phase of growth. Process improvement, documentation, polite terms for pushing me into a corner office with no real authority. After 11 years of building this company's reputation, I was being demoted to filing paperwork, while a 25-year-old MBA ran projects he didn't understand. I stood up slowly, feeling 43 pairs of eyes watching my reaction. The smart move would be to smile, shake hands, and make gracious remarks about new opportunities. The expected move would be to explode, to list everything Pierce had already broken, to force Cormac to choose between family loyalty and business survival. Instead, I did something that surprised even myself. I smiled genuinely and raised my glass. "To Pierce," I said, my voice carrying clearly across the silent room. "May you build something that lasts." Then I walked out. No dramatic speeches, no burned bridges, no ultimatums. I simply collected my coat and left the restaurant. My phone started buzzing before I reached my truck. Text messages from foremen, project managers, and longtime clients who'd witnessed the humiliation. I turned off the phone and drove home through the snowy Denver streets, thinking about what my father would have done. Jack Crestwood had been laid off twice in his career, both times by companies that valued politics over craftsmanship. He never complained, never sought revenge, never bad-mouthed his former employers. He just found new work and built his reputation one project at a time. "The work speaks for itself, Nolan," he used to say. "Good work attracts good people. Everything else is just noise." I spent the holidays reviewing my options. I had savings, industry connections, and a track record that spoke volumes. Pierce might have the Tiernan name, but I had something more valuable: the trust of people who actually understood construction. The call came on January 3rd, 2023, just as I was updating my resume. "Nolan, this is Bastian Holloway. We met briefly at the AGC conference last fall. I was hoping we could grab coffee this afternoon." Bastian Holloway owned 3 hotel properties in Denver and had invested in construction companies across Colorado for the past 15 years. Smart money, patient capital, the kind of investor who understood that good buildings required good people. We met at Snooze on Ballpark. Nothing fancy, just two professionals talking business over breakfast. Bastian was direct in the way successful people often are. "I've been watching Tiernan and Sons for 3 years," he said, stirring cream into his coffee. "Your quality metrics, client retention, safety record. Impressive numbers. Then I heard about the management changes. Pierce is bringing fresh perspectives to the business," I said diplomatically. Bastian laughed. "Fresh perspectives. That's one way to put it. I heard he tried to convince the Morrison Medical Group to use prefab components for their surgical wing expansion, for a medical facility, where precision matters more than profit margins." He was right. Pierce had pitched that exact idea 2 weeks before Christmas, arguing that modular construction could reduce costs and timeline. The client's engineer had to explain why custom millwork and specialized installations couldn't be mass-produced in a factory. "Here's what I'm thinking," Bastian continued. "I've got capital sitting around earning 4.5% in treasury bills. You've got skills that could earn 28% annual returns on the right projects. Why don't we start something together? You handle operations, I handle financing and bonding. 50-50 partnership." It was exactly what I hadn't dared to hope for. Complete operational control, adequate funding, and a partner who understood that construction was about more than spreadsheets and profit optimization. But I also knew what it would mean. Starting over at 45. Competing directly against the company I'd built. Potentially destroying relationships with people I'd worked alongside for over a decade. "I need to think about it," I told him. "Of course. But don't think too long. Pierce is making enemies faster than you can count, and those enemies are looking for alternatives." He was right about that too. By the second week of January, 3 different clients had called me directly, asking if I was planning to start my own firm. Word travels fast in Denver's construction community, and Pierce's early mistakes were becoming industry gossip. The decision became easier when I returned to the Tiernan and Sons office on January 8, 2023. Pierce had moved into the corner office that had been Cormac's for 30 years. New furniture, new computer, new motivational posters about synergy and disruption. My old office had been converted into a storage room for his business school textbooks and unused equipment he'd ordered without consulting anyone. I found myself relocated to a windowless room next to the copy machine, with a metal desk that belonged in a government surplus store. The nameplate read, "Strategic Advisor." No mention of my 11 years rebuilding the company. No acknowledgement of the relationships I'd cultivated. No respect for the systems I'd implemented. "Morning, Nolan," Pierce said, passing my door with his usual confident stride. "I've got some documentation projects that'll be perfect for your skill set. Client contract reviews, permit applications, that sort of thing. Paperwork. After managing million-dollar projects and leading construction teams, He wanted me to file permits and proofread contracts. It was humiliating, but it was also revealing. Pierce genuinely believed that construction management was about administration rather than expertise. I spent 2 weeks in that room, watching Pierce make decisions that would have made my father cringe. He approved subcontractor bids without checking references. He promised delivery dates that ignored weather patterns and material lead times. He cut safety protocols that had taken years to establish. On January 23rd, I watched him approve electrical work from a contractor I'd specifically blacklisted in 2018, after they'd failed 3 consecutive inspections. When I tried to explain the history, Pierce waved me off. "That was under the old management structure," he said. "We're implementing a more collaborative vendor approach now." The collaborative approach lasted exactly 4 days. The electrical contractor showed up drunk to the Wheat Ridge Shopping Center project and nearly electrocuted himself installing junction boxes. The fire marshal shut down the entire site pending investigation. That afternoon, I called Bastian Holloway. "I'm interested in your proposal," I told him, "but I have conditions. We do this right with proper licensing, bonding, and safety protocols. No corners cut, no shortcuts, no compromises on quality." "Wouldn't have it any other way," Bastian replied. "Can you meet tomorrow morning? I've got lawyers standing by to file incorporation papers." We met at his office in the Denver Tech Center, a glass building that overlooked the mountains. His conference room had architectural drawings spread across every surface: hotel expansions, retail developments, office complexes, projects that needed the kind of experienced management Pierce couldn't provide. "I've been doing research," Bastian said, sliding a folder across the table. "Crestline Builders, named after your father, I assume?" I nodded. Jack Crestwood's middle name had been Crestline, after the street where he'd grown up in Cleveland. It felt right to honor his memory in the name of something built on his principles. "We'll need initial capitalization of $3.2 million for equipment, bonding, and working capital," Bastian continued. "I can have that transferred within 48 hours. The question is, how quickly can you assemble a team?" The answer was quicker than either of us expected. Sable Nguyen was the first to join. She'd been my operations manager at Tiernan & Sons for 6 years, handling scheduling, procurement, and client communications with the efficiency of a Swiss watch. When I called her on February 6th, she didn't hesitate. "Pierce tried to schedule 3 concrete pours for the same day last week," she said. "Then he couldn't understand why the crews were confused. I've been updating my resume since Christmas." Dario Velas followed the next day. Master electrician, 28 years in commercial construction. The kind of craftsman who could wire a building blindfolded. He'd worked on every major project I'd managed since 2014. "That boy doesn't know a conduit from a cable tray," Dario told me over lunch at El Taco de Mexico. "Yesterday he asked me why we couldn't just run everything through the drop ceiling to save money. I tried to explain fire codes and load calculations, He said we'd workshop solutions in his next team meeting. By the end of February 2023, 6 key employees had given notice at Tiernan & Sons and accepted positions with Crestline Builders. Not because I recruited them, but because they'd watched Pierce's decision-making and drawn their own conclusions about the company's future. The subcontractors were even easier. Miguel Santos, who'd done our concrete work for 8 years. Janet Wheeler's plumbing crew. Thompson Roofing, Allied Steel, Denver Commercial HVAC. They'd all worked with me long enough to know the difference between competent management and MBA theories. Pierce called me last week, Miguel told me while we reviewed plans for our first project. Wanted to negotiate lower rates because of market conditions. I explained that my prices reflect quality and reliability. He said he'd find someone more budget-conscious. Miguel laughed and shook his head. Good luck with that. The budget contractors are the ones who will leave you with cracked foundations and lawsuits. Our first contract came through Bastion's network, a medical office building in Thornton. 3 stories, underground parking, tight deadline. Exactly the type of project that had made Tiernan & Sons profitable under my management. The client was Dr. Sarah Mitchell, a radiologist who'd been burned by shoddy construction on her previous clinic. I heard about your new company through Bastion, she said during our initial meeting in March 2023. Your reputation precedes you, Mr. Crestwood. I need this building completed correctly, on time and within budget. No surprises, no excuses, no amateur hour. That's exactly what we deliver, I told her. We broke ground on March 1st, 2023. While Pierce was struggling to keep his inherited projects on schedule, we were ahead of timeline and under budget. Our inspection pass rate remained at 98%. Our safety record was spotless. Word spread quickly through Denver's medical community. By May 2023, we had 3 more contracts signed and 2 additional projects in development. Bastion's investment was paying returns ahead of projections. The team was working with the enthusiasm that comes from being respected and trusted. Meanwhile, Tiernan & Sons was unraveling exactly as I'd predicted. The Wheat Ridge Shopping Center project had been delayed 4 months due to Pierce's electrical contractor debacle. The Morrison Medical expansion had been canceled after Pierce suggested using cheaper materials that failed to meet healthcare facility standards. 2 longtime clients had terminated their contracts and requested recommendations for alternative contractors. The calls started in July 2023. Nolan, this is Jim Patterson from Patterson Architecture. We've got a client looking for a reliable contractor for a senior living facility in Aurora. Are you taking new projects? Nolan, it's Dr. Roberts from the Medical Plaza. We're planning an expansion. Could we set up a meeting? Mr. Crestwood, this is Amanda Richardson from the school district. We heard you've started your own firm. We have several projects coming up for bid. Every call represented relationships I'd built during my 11 years at Tiernan & Sons. Relationships that had never belonged to the company name, but to the quality of work and reliability I delivered. Pierce had inherited a business, but he'd never earned the trust that made it profitable. The breaking point for Cormac came in September 2023, when the city of Denver threatened to suspend Tiernan & Sons' general contractor license due to repeated code violations and failed inspections. Pierce had cut corners on a municipal building project using materials that didn't meet earthquake-resistant standards. I was reviewing plans for the Thornton Medical Building when my phone rang. Cormac's name appeared on the caller ID. I almost didn't answer. "Nolan, we need to talk," Cormac said, his Irish accent thicker when he was stressed. "Can you meet me for coffee? Same place we used to go." The Cherry Cricket had been our regular spot for lunch meetings back when Cormac trusted my judgment. A dive bar that served excellent burgers and didn't care if construction guys tracked mud on their floors. We'd solved dozens of project problems over beers and napkin sketches in that back booth. I found him already waiting, looking older than his 69 years. The stress was visible in his posture, the way his hands shook slightly as he lifted his coffee cup. This wasn't the confident businessman who'd bought a vacation home in Aspen. This was a man watching his life's work crumble. "You look good, Nolan," he said. "Heard you're doing well with the new company." "We're staying busy," I replied neutrally. 3 medical buildings, 2 office complexes, and the school district contract, Cormac said. "That's what I heard. Impressive for 6 months in business." He'd been keeping track. That told me everything about how desperate things had become. "The city's threatening to pull our license," he continued, staring into his coffee. "Pierce missed a structural inspection on the municipal building. 3rd time in 2 months. They're talking about fines, lawsuits, maybe criminal charges if someone gets hurt." I waited. This conversation had been inevitable since January. "I made a mistake," Cormac said finally. "Bringing Pierce in like that, pushing you out. I thought blood was thicker than business sense." "You didn't push me out, Cormac. You made a choice." "I know that now. Pierce doesn't understand construction. Hell, he doesn't understand people. Half the crew has quit. Our best subcontractors won't return calls. Yesterday, Miguel Santos told me his concrete crew was booked solid through next year, for everyone except us." Miguel had never been subtle about his loyalties. Good for him. "What do you want, Cormac?" "Come back. Help me fix this mess. Teach Pierce how to actually run a construction company. You know these projects. You know the people. You could turn this around." The offer I'd been expecting. The desperate plea from a man who'd finally realized that nepotism couldn't substitute for competence. "What are you offering?" I asked. "Full partnership, 25% ownership, complete operational control. Pierce reports to you, not the other way around." It was a generous offer. More than generous. Tiernan & Sons still had name recognition, existing contracts, and established credit lines. With my management and Cormac's connections, we could probably salvage most of the damage Pierce had caused. but it would mean abandoning the team that had trusted me enough to follow. It would mean breaking faith with Bastion, who'd invested $3.2 million in our partnership. Most importantly, it would mean pretending that the Christmas party humiliation had never happened. "I appreciate the offer," I said, "but I'm not interested." Cormac's face fell. "Nolan, please. I'm begging you. This company, the business I built for 30 years, and it's dying. Pierce doesn't know how to save it, and I'm too old to start over." "You're not too old," I told him. "You're just not willing to make the hard choice." "What choice?" "Fire Pierce. Admit you made a mistake. Rebuild your reputation one project at a time, the same way you did when you started." Cormac shook his head. "He's my son. And that's exactly the problem. You chose family over business. Now you want me to fix the consequences of that choice while Pierce keeps his position and his pride intact. He could learn." "No." I stood up, dropping a $10 bill on the table for my coffee. "He could have learned. He had 18 months to prove he belonged in that office. Instead, he nearly got someone electrocuted, failed dozens of inspections, and drove away clients we'd spent years cultivating. So that's it? You're going to let the company die out of spite?" The accusation stung because it was exactly backwards. "I'm not letting anything die, Cormac. You killed it when you decided Pierce's feelings mattered more than your employees' livelihoods. I'm just building something better." I walked away from the cherry cricket knowing I'd never see Cormac Tiernan again as anything other than a cautionary tale. 3 months later, in December 2023, Tiernan and Sons filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. Pierce had taken on 2 projects simultaneously without adequate bonding, then failed to complete either one on schedule. The client sued for damages. The subcontractors filed liens. The city revoked their general contractor license pending investigation of safety violations. Cormac lost the Aspen vacation home first, then the family house in Cherry Hills Village. Pierce moved back in with his parents, while his MBA gathered dust, and his LinkedIn profile quietly removed the word president from his title. The local construction trade magazines covered the bankruptcy with the clinical detachment of business journalism. But everyone in the industry understood the real story. A successful company had been destroyed by nepotism, arrogance, and the toxic combination of inexperience with unlimited authority. Meanwhile, Crestline Builders was thriving. We'd completed 14 projects ahead of schedule and under budget by the end of 2024. Our safety record was perfect. Our client satisfaction scores were the highest in Denver's commercial construction market. Bastion's investment had tripled in value, and we were already operating in Colorado Springs and Fort Collins with plans for expansion into Pueblo. The success felt good, but it wasn't the victory I'd imagined. There was no moment of dramatic confrontation, no scene where I got to explain to Pierce exactly how badly he'd failed. The revenge was quieter than that, more professional, more permanent. I'd simply built something better than what they'd destroyed. On the 2-year anniversary of leaving Tiernan and Sons in January 2025, I drove past their old office building in Lakewood. The for lease sign had been up for 16 months. Weeds grew through cracks in the parking lot asphalt. The building looked exactly like what it was, the abandoned headquarters of a company that had confused family loyalty with business judgment. My phone buzzed with a text from Sable. Thornton Medical Building just passed final inspection. No corrections needed. Client wants to discuss Phase 2 expansion. I smiled and drove toward our new office in the Denver Tech Center. 3 floors of modern workspace where craftsmanship was valued over politics and competence mattered more than bloodlines. The nameplate on my office door read, President, Crestline Builders. But more importantly, it represented something my father would have been proud of. A company built on the principle that good work speaks for itself. The best revenge I'd learned wasn't destruction. It was simply doing the job better than the people who thought they could replace you. Pierce Tiernan had inherited a successful company and turned it into a cautionary tale. I'd started with nothing and built something that would last. That's the difference between earning respect and expecting it. One creates legacy, the other just creates debt. If you enjoyed this story, please like this video and leave a comment sharing what you thought about it. And if you haven't already subscribed to the channel, please subscribe and hit the notification bell to get alerts for new stories like this one. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.